All right, so you sent me all these articles on the English language,
Uh-huh.
and it looks like we're ready for another deep dive
Yeah.
into how this, tongue from a tiny island nation became this global phenomenon.
What's fascinating is that, English wasn't predestined to be, conquer the world or anything like that.
Right.
It's full of these twists and turns and power struggles and, really had to adapt in ways that you wouldn't expect.
It's almost like a, underdog story.
Absolutely.
It came from humble beginnings
Yes.
and rose to conquer the world.
Yeah. To understand this journey, we're going to have to go back to the 5th century.
Okay.
This is a time when England was not this, unified, powerful country we think of today.
Right.
It was a patchwork of small kingdoms, each
Right.
with their own dialects.
So not really like the England we see today.
Not quite, no.
Okay.
This is the era of Anglo-Saxon England,
Gotcha.
and the language spoken then was Old English,
Okay.
and it was a world away from what we speak today.
Oh, wow.
You can imagine a language with complex grammar rules,
Right.
more akin to modern German.
So even understanding how English started is a challenge.
It is.
I mean, were there any signs back then that this language would be spoken by, billions of people one day?
It's hard to say, but what we do know is that Old English was shaped by migration and conquest.
Okay.
Waves of Germanic tribes, the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes,
Right.
brought their dialects to the island, and these eventually melded into what we call Old English.
So English's habit of just borrowing words and, adapting started back then.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a linguistic melting pot,
Yeah.
All these different ingredients come together to create something new.
Right.
And this openness to outside influences would become a defining characteristic of English.
Okay.
And it really helped it, even in the face of some major challenges.
Speaking of challenges, I read that the Vikings had a pretty big impact on English.
Yeah.
And weren't they more known for raiding than language lessons?
They certainly had a reputation for raiding, but they also left a lasting mark on the English language.
Yep.
From the 8th to the 11th centuries, Viking incursions and settlements brought their language, Old Norse, into contact with Old English.
So I guess you could say they brought more than just their longboats,
Exactly.
to English.
Yeah. So how did this Viking influence actually shape English?
Yeah, what did it do?
Well, you can still hear it today in words like sky, egg, knife, even take, and window.
Oh, wow.
These are everyday words,
Yeah.
essential to how we communicate.
Right.
And they have their roots in those Viking encounters.
That's mind-blowing.
It is, isn't it?
Little pieces of Viking language are in our everyday speech.
Exactly. And it's a testament to the flexibility of English.
Yeah.
Instead of being overwhelmed by Old Norse, it absorbed these new words,
Right.
integrated them into its vocabulary, and became even richer for it.
Okay, so we've got this, evolving language shaped by migration and Viking raids.
Yeah.
What happened next was this when it started to sound more like the English that we know today.
Not quite. The biggest turning point was yet to come.
Cool.
Picture this. The year is 1066.
Okay.
And William the Conqueror, leading an army of Norman French speakers, invades England.
Ah, yes, the Norman Conquest.
Precisely.
I remember that from my history classes. It completely reshaped England.
Absolutely. And it had a seismic impact on the language.
Oh, wow.
Overnight, Norman French became the language of power,
Okay.
prestige, the ruling class.
Hmm.
Imagine the challenge for English. How do you survive when your own land is ruled by a foreign tongue?
Right.
It's really a pivotal moment in the
Yeah.
history of English.
Wow. Okay,
Oh.
so English is facing an existential threat.
Yeah.
Did it just, give in and just become French?
That's what's fascinating about this period.
Okay.
English could have easily been relegated to the sidelines, a language spoken only by the common folk.
Right.
But instead of disappearing, it went underground, so to speak, and began a remarkable transformation.
So how did it manage to survive this French invasion?
It adapted as it had done before.
Okay.
Over the next few centuries, a fascinating process of linguistic blending took place.
Okay.
English started absorbing words from Norman French,
Okay.
particularly in areas like law, government, and the arts.
So instead of being replaced, it just started incorporating the language of the conquerors.
Precisely think of words like court, jury, justice, parliament.
Right.
These are all borrowed from Norman French, reflecting the new power structures in England.
Okay.
And this fusion of Germanic and Romance influences gave rise to what we now call Middle English.
Middle English, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Isn't that the language of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales?
Exactly. The Canterbury Tales is a brilliant example of Middle English literature.
Okay.
And it gives us a glimpse into this evolving language, this fascinating blend of old and new.
Right.
But even as English was finding its footing again, it faced another challenge.
Another one, it seems like English had a really tough time getting to where it is.
You could say that this time the challenge came not from conquest, but
Okay.
from a surge in knowledge and ideas.
Oh,
The Renaissance, starting in the 16th century, ushered in a period of intellectual and artistic flowering,
right.
and English needed to adapt to express these new concepts.
So it needed a vocabulary upgrade, like downloading the latest software patch.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
English was hungry for new words,
Okay.
and it found them in the classical languages of Latin and Greek.
Right.
Scholars and writers began borrowing words to express complex ideas in science, philosophy, art, and literature.
And this is where Shakespeare comes in,
Mm.
right? Didn't he invent a ton of new words?
He certainly contributed to this linguistic expansion.
Yeah.
Shakespeare, with his unparalleled mastery of language, is credited with coining or popularizing over 1,700 words, many of which we still use today.
Wow, that's a lot of words.
It is.
And like lonely, generous assassination, they're still relevant to our lives today.
Precisely, Shakespeare's genius was not just in his storytelling, but in his ability to mold the language to fit his needs.
Right.
He wasn't afraid to experiment, to borrow, to invent, and in doing so, he enriched the English language immeasurably.
So it's amazing how much English changed during this period, all while facing these just monumental challenges.
It's a testament to the language's adaptability and resilience.
Yeah.
But English's journey wasn't confined to England.
Right.
As we move into the 17th and 18th centuries, the British Empire begins to expand its reach across the globe,
Okay.
and English embarks on a new adventure.
So the language that had been shaped by invasions and Viking raids and intellectual revolutions,
Yes.
now it's setting sail for new lands.
Exactly. And as the British Empire spread its influence, English went with it,
Yeah.
carried on the ships of explorers, traders, and colonists.
So I imagine this led to even more borrowing and adapting.
Absolutely. From the Americas to Australia,
Wow.
from India to Africa, English encountered a dazzling array of new languages and cultures. And true to form, it began absorbing words from these encounters, adding even more flavors to its already diverse linguistic stew.
So English was becoming a truly global language, even as it was still evolving back in England.
That's right. Back in England, a movement towards standardization was taking hold.
Okay.
Scholars and lexicographers were trying to bring some order to this ever-growing, ever-changing language.
I can see why with English spreading across the world, there had to be some consistency.
Exactly. And in 1755, Samuel Johnson published his groundbreaking Dictionary of the English Language,
Oh, wow.
a monumental work that helped to standardize English spelling and usage.
So that was a pretty big deal.
It was a landmark achievement in the development of English, providing a much-needed anchor in a sea of linguistic change.
So we have English evolving on multiple fronts, spreading globally, becoming more standardized at home, and all the while still adapting and borrowing new words.
And that's just a taste of what was to come.
Oh, no.
As we move into the 19th and 20th centuries, English would face new challenges and opportunities, cementing its position as the world's most spoken language.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing how English managed to not only survive, but actually thrive,
Yeah.
through all these twists and turns, from Viking raids to global expansion. It seems like every challenge just made it stronger.
That's a great observation. English has this incredible ability to adapt, to absorb new influences without losing its core identity.
Right.
And as we enter the 19th and 20th centuries, that adaptability would be put to the test once again.
So what new challenges came up during this time? I mean, the world was changing pretty rapidly.
It was a time of unprecedented change.
Right.
Industrial revolution, technological advancements, global conflicts,
Yeah.
and English found itself at the center of it all.
So how did English become the language of this, rapidly changing world? Was it just a matter of being in the right place at the right time?
It was a combination of factors.
Yeah.
The British Empire at its peak played a significant role,
Okay.
spreading English across vast territories, but it was more than just political power.
So what else contributed to its rise?
Well, the Industrial Revolution, which originated in Britain, propelled English to the forefront of science, technology, and commerce.
Wow.
New inventions, new industries, new ways of doing business English became the language of innovation.
So English was no longer just the language of conquerors and explorers. It was the language of progress.
Exactly. And as the 20th century unfolded, two world wars, while devastating in their impact, further solidified English's position as the language of global communication.
Really? How so? I mean, weren't these wars fought across different languages and cultures?
They were, but in the aftermath of these conflicts, there was a growing need for international cooperation, diplomacy, and understanding. And English, already widely spoken, emerged as the common language for these interactions.
So it was like a linguistic bridge,
Yeah,
helping to connect a world fractured by conflict.
that's a powerful way to put it. And this trend continued as we entered the Cold War era. English became the language of diplomacy, espionage, and even pop culture, with American music and movies spreading its influence across the globe.
Right. And then, of course, came the internet, which completely revolutionized how we communicate.
The internet was a game changer for English. Suddenly, geographical boundaries became less relevant,
Right.
and English, already established as a language of international communication, became the dominant language of the digital world.
So all those challenges that English had overcome, the invasions, the power struggles, the standardization,
Mhm.
they actually prepared it for this digital age.
In a way, yes, its flexibility, its ability to absorb new words and adapt to new situations made it perfectly suited for the ever-changing landscape of the internet.
But with English spoken by so many different people in so many different contexts, is there a risk that it will fragment into a bunch of different dialects that can barely understand each other?
It's a valid concern. We already see the emergence of distinct varieties of English. Indian English, Nigerian English, Singaporean English, each with its own unique flavor and nuances.
So is it becoming less about one correct English and more about a network of interconnected Englishes?
That's a great way to think about it. The future of English is likely to be one of diversity, with regional variations continuing to evolve.
Okay.
But there will also be a need for common ground, for a shared understanding that allows people from different backgrounds to communicate effectively.
So what does all this mean for the future of English? Will it continue to dominate, or will something new emerge?
It's impossible to predict with certainty, but one thing is clear. English has become deeply embedded in the fabric of global communication.
Yeah.
It's the language of science, business, technology, diplomacy, and entertainment.
So English is no longer just a language. It's a global phenomenon, a cultural force that connects people from all walks of life.
Precisely. And its journey from a small island to the global stage is a testament to the enduring power of language to adapt, evolve, and ultimately to bring people together.
Well, it's been an incredible journey tracing the path of English from those early Anglo-Saxon roots to its digital dominance. Thanks to this deep dive, I have a whole new appreciation for the challenges it faced and the milestones it achieved to become the language we know today. So it's pretty amazing how English has managed to not only survive, but thrive
Yeah.
through all these twists and turns, from Viking raids to global expansion. Every challenge just seems to have made it stronger.
That's a great point. English really does have this incredible ability to adapt, to take in new influences without losing that core identity.
Right.
And as we move into the 19th and 20th centuries, that adaptability would be tested yet again.
Okay, so what new challenges did English face? I mean, the world was changing so rapidly at that time.
It was a period of unprecedented change, really. The Industrial Revolution, technological advancements, global conflicts.
Right.
And English found itself at the center of it all.
So how did English become the language of this new world? Was it just being in the right place at the right time?
Well, it was a few things. The British Empire was at its peak and played a big part in spreading English across huge territories.
Right.
But it was more than just politics.
So what else helped it grow?
The Industrial Revolution really pushed English to the front of science, technology, and business.
Okay.
New inventions, new industries, new ways of doing things. English became the language of innovation.
So English wasn't just the language of conquerors and explorers anymore. It was the language of progress.
Exactly. And then as the 20th century went on, even with 2 world wars, which were obviously devastating,
Right.
English became even more solidified as the language of global communication.
Really? How did that happen? I mean, those wars were fought across so many different languages and cultures.
They were, but after those conflicts, there was a huge need for international cooperation, for diplomacy, for
Yeah.
understanding.
Right.
And English, which was already pretty widespread, it became the common language for
Yeah.
these interactions.
So it was like a bridge,
Mm-hmm.
helping to connect a world that was fractured by all this conflict.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And this carried on into the Cold War era.
Right.
English became the language of diplomacy and espionage, even pop culture,
Oh, wow.
with American music and movies spreading its influence everywhere.
Right. And then we have the internet,
Oh, yeah.
which totally changed how we
The
communicate.
internet changed everything for English. Suddenly, it didn't matter as much where you were, and
Yeah.
English, which was already a language of global communication, became the main language of the online world.
So all those challenges that English faced before the invasions, the power struggles trying to standardize it,
Right.
it kind of prepared it for this whole new digital age.
In a way, yeah, it's flexibility, its ability to adapt and take in new words and just roll with it.
Yeah.
It made English perfect for this crazy world of the internet.
But with so many different people speaking English in so many different places, do we run the risk of it breaking up
Uh-huh.
into all these different dialects that can't understand each other?
That's a good question. We're already seeing these different types of English pop up.
Right.
Indian English, Nigerian English, Singaporean English, each with their own little quirks.
So is it becoming less about one correct English and more about a network of all these Englishes that are connected?
I think that's a really good way to look at it. The future of English is probably going to be one of diversity.
Oh,
All these different regional variations will keep evolving,
right.
but we'll still need some common ground,
Yeah.
some shared understanding so that everyone can talk to each other.
So what does all of this mean for the future? Will English stay on top or will something new come along?
It's tough to say for sure, but one thing is clear. English is a big part of global communication.
Yeah.
It's the language of science, business, technology, diplomacy, entertainment.
So it's not just a language, it's this global phenomenon. It's this
Oh.
cultural force that brings people from all walks of life together.
Exactly. And its journey from a small island to the global stage is a real testament to how powerful language can be. It adapts, evolves, and ultimately it brings us all together.
Wow. Well, it's been an incredible journey tracing the path of English from those early Anglo-Saxon roots all the way to its dominance in the digital age.
It has.
This deep dive has given me a whole new appreciation for the challenges English faced and the incredible things it's accomplished to get to where it is today.
It's been my pleasure to share it with you. The story of English really shows us that language is always changing.
Yeah.
It reflects how dynamic human history and culture really are.
And who knows what the future holds?
Mhm.
New words will pop up. Technology is going to keep changing how we talk to each other.
Right.
But English, in all of its different forms, it's going to keep being important in shaping the world.
Yeah, I agree. So keep exploring, keep learning,
Yeah.
and keep your ears open for whatever crazy new things happen in the story of English.
Great advice. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with a brand new topic, ready to uncover more hidden connections and surprising stories. Until then, keep those minds curious.